I'm Joe from As the Joe Flies.
And I'm Leslie from Trips with Tykes.
And welcome back to Disney Deciphered. So it's been actually almost exactly a month since Disney introduced its new line skipping product, which is Lightning Lane Multi-Pass and Lightning Lane Single Pass. So we're going to do a little 101 episode on that. Full disclosure, Leslie and I have not used it in the parks yet, although I have purchased it for a friend of mine and helped her purchase all of hers. And I actually did some research myself and purchased some Lightning Lanes for this Sunday, even though I am going to be in Massachusetts for research, Leslie, and for science. So we're going to talk about the basics, what you need to know if you're planning a vacation. And then, of course, later this fall, after Leslie and I have gotten down to try it out for ourselves, we will do a 201 episode with some higher level techniques to maximize multi-pass as much as we can. Before we get to that, we want to thank some new Patreon subscribers. Who do we got today, Leslie?
That's right. We're thanking new supporters Andrea G. and Matt S. Thank you so much for supporting the podcast. You can join these fine folks by going to patreon.com/Disney Deciphered, where there are lots of different options available to you. You get all sorts of bonuses, our unfiltered episodes, ad-free content, membership in our Facebook group, etc., etc. So thanks to everybody, past and present, for being there for us.
Yes, thank you so much. So let's do an overview really quickly. Essentially, we had, if you are a longtime Disney fan, you remember Fastpass Plus. Was it called Fastpass Plus or just Fastpass? Just Fastpass.
It was just Fastpass, like in the paper days, right? Yay.
Yes.
Long time ago.
And then Fastpass Plus was like the app version of that?
Yes.
Maybe?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes,
Who knows?
that's right.
Ancient
well,
history.
It's all different. Disneyland, Disney World, it all,
So,
same names, different things. Yeah.
There was a Fastpass system. It used to be free. And then coming out of the pandemic, Disney introduced Genie Plus, which was a new skip the line system, which was paid. Along with Genie Plus came individual Lightning Lanes, which were like the extra good rides in Disney's estimation, were a la carte purchases that you had to make. And now Lightning Lane Multi-Pass, Lightning Lane Single Pass is kind of a hybrid, a mutant child of Fastpass and Genie Plus. And so some of the terminology has remained the same, but a lot of it has changed. And really the big changes have been at Disney World, which is what we're going to cover this episode. Really quickly, Leslie, the name has changed at Disneyland, but for all intents and purposes, tell us what Lightning Lane Multi-Pass and Lightning Lane Single Pass look like at Disneyland.
So for all intents and purposes, this is still Genie Plus, an individual Lightning Lane at Disneyland. The rules are still the same. It's still a same day product at Disneyland. This is going to confuse people because more than ever, the products have truly diverged, even though we're still calling them the same thing. So there is a Lightning Lane Multi-Pass at Disneyland. It's just Genie Plus. There's still a Lightning Lane Single Pass at Disneyland, and it's just individual Lightning Lane. So please separate those two in your mind, because this is definitely going to get people.
Yeah, not to further confuse things, our previous Genie Plus episodes probably going to just, as they would say across the pond, bin them all, throw them in the trash eventually. However, our Disneyland Genie Plus episode, which is actually episode 272, pretty much everything from that remains the same and still works, except for it's just not called Genie Plus. It's called Lightning Lane Multi-Pass and Lightning Lane Single Pass. But everything else, you're like, if you take Lightning Lane Multi-Pass, and you can't do this with videos or audio, but if you could, just control find and replace Genie Plus with Lightning Lane Multi-Pass on that episode 272 for Disneyland in California, to be clear, that would work. And so that's fine. But we're here to talk about Disney World, where Lightning Lane Multi-Pass, I don't even know what they should have come up with different names, but I guess that's neither here nor there because it would be less confusing for people. But Lightning Lane Multi-Pass is a new system with new rules, and we're going to go over the basics today so that you're ready for your trip. And so let's get started, Leslie. We should just kind of take a look at what it is and what it means.
Sure. So let's first start with, I guess, defining our terms. We've talked about Lightning Lane Multi-Pass and Lightning Lane Single Pass. So both of these now at Walt Disney World are things that you can pre-book. Like that's the important distinction that folks need to understand. The biggest difference from Genie Plus, that you can pre-book these things. So Lightning Lane Multipass is kind of the successor to Genie Plus at Walt Disney World. So it's a product that you buy and it includes a bundle of a lot of different rides potentially. Now, not all of them, you won't get all of them, but it gives you the right to sort of choose from among that bundle of rides. Lightning Lane Single Pass is pretty similar to what individual Lightning Lane used to be at Walt Disney World. You're just buying one ride, like a return time to go to a specific ride. And currently, at the time we're recording this, there are 5 rides at Walt Disney World that offer Lightning Lane Single Pass: Cosmic Rewind, Flight of Passage, Rise of the Resistance, Seven Dwarfs Mine Train, and Tron. That will change over time. And if you're listening to this a year from now, then there probably will be something new. So we're going to kind of bracket that for purposes of this episode, because those are pretty straightforward, and we'll discuss those maybe in 201 and some strategy points with that. But mostly what folks need to learn about is Lightning Lane Multipass, because it's more complicated.
Yeah, when we get to 201, we'll talk about, like, for single pass, you can only buy 2 per day, blah, blah, blah. But honestly, if you knew the old individual Lightning Lane rules, it's mostly the same for single pass, except for you can pre-book now. But the pre-booking is the main thing for multipass. And I guess we should back up really quickly in case you're coming at this from completely like this is your first time. When we say skip the line, we mean that when you walk up to a line at an attraction that offers Lightning Lane, there are 2 physical queues you can enter. One's called the standby line, where you just wait in line, and we'll just put virtual queues to the side for the purposes of simplification for today. But there is the standby queue where you just stand and wait in line, and you just, the line just moves and you just wait your turn. And then there's the Lightning Lane, which, I still remember when Brooke McDonald came on to the first talk about Genie Plus. The Lightning Lane is the physical lane that you're going through if you have purchased either multipass or a single pass. And so when you've purchased multipass, you are getting access to these Lightning Lanes, which I'll just say anecdotally, these Lightning Lanes have been a lot shorter than they were in the Genie Plus days. In the Genie Plus days, they could back up and you'd be waiting 10 minutes like regularly in the Lightning Lane. A lot of these Lightning Lanes these days are actual Lightning Lanes. Sometimes you just walk straight on the attraction. And so, just so you know, you are sometimes drastically cutting down your wait in line. And of course, that's the goal, because Disney wants you to pay for these things.
That's right. And we should also add, you don't just get to walk into the Lightning Lane because you've purchased Lightning Lane Multipass. And this is different than a lot of other theme park cut the line systems, where maybe you pay a price and then you just get to use the lane all day long, no matter what. At Disney World, there's a middle step, and this is like where all of this episode is going to focus. You have to actually book ride times. And at Disney World, you get a 1-hour ride time, and that's when you return to the Lightning Lane. So for a specific ride. So it's not so simple. Like, you're not done just by making the purchase. You still have to then be able to use the system. And that's what we're going to be mostly talking about now.
Yeah, so let's get to these rules. So the first thing is, we keep saying that you can pre-purchase this Lightning Lane Multipass. You can pre-select your attraction. So let's talk about a little bit what we mean by that. If you're staying on site at a Disney World hotel, or at the Swan, the Dolphin, or the Swan Reserve. Oh, Shades of Green as well. After you have linked that reservation to your My Disney Experience account, 7 days before your check-in date at 7 a.m. Eastern, you can book your Lightning Lane Multi-Pass and your Lightning Lane Single Passes for your entire trip, up to a 14-day long trip, which is really the longest. Actually, you can't book a hotel longer than 14 days. So unless you have a split stay that's like going for a month or something like that, you are going to be able to book for the length of your trip. And so when we say pre-booking, this is the window when you're pre-booking. If you are on site, I'll say it again, 7 days before you check in, you can book for pretty much your entire trip for most people. If you're off-site, you are at a pretty major disadvantage, because you can only book 3 days before. Anybody can book 3 days into the future, but then you have to do it day by day. So let's say I'm staying off site. Today's August 23rd. I'm checking in to Disney World, or I'm going to Disney World on August 26th. Today, I can book my August 26th multi-pass. tomorrow I can book my August 27th one, so on and so forth. So you can see how staying on site, this is one of the advantages they've brought back to staying on site, because you can book it all at once.
Yeah, exactly. This is a huge advantage. And there will be, we'll talk about this, some rides that there's just much more availability at that 7 day mark, most availability at that 7 day mark. And there won't be much left for folks at that 3 day mark, depending again on crowds and things like that. So, what can you pre book? You can pre book up to 3 attractions on Lightning Lane MultiPass in a single park. But here's where we put an asterisk in. You can't book any 3. Several of the parks have what we call tier restrictions. They have 2 different buckets of rides. Tier 1 rides are like the headliners that most people really want to ride, the thrill rides, things like that. And then the rest is, some good rides and then also just some filler rides. So tier 1 and tier 2. The rules are you can book 1 tier 1 and you can book 2 tier 2s, or you could book 3 tier 2s. So you're really limited to just pre-booking 1 headliner with Lightning Lane MultiPass. And again, all of these bookings have to be in a single park. These first 3 bookings, you can't, even if you have a park hopper ticket, you can't pre-plan to park hop for the day.
That's correct. And you can also, we should say, book less than 3 if you want. If that's like, especially some parks, maybe you're planning to park hop anyway, and you're like, I'm not even going to book these fake filler ones that I'm going to end up modifying or transferring anyway. Now, like we said, we're mostly bracketing Lightning Lane single pass for the purposes of the episode. But as you're going through one day, as you buy your Lightning Lane multi passes, you can also add up to 2 Lightning Lane single passes for that same day. And I should point out, those do not need to be in the same park. They don't need to be in the same park as the multi-pass, and they don't need to be in the same park as each other if you have a park hopper ticket. So, theoretically, you could buy, I almost said Genie Plus. You could buy multi-pass for Magic Kingdom, book 3 attractions there, book Rise of the Resistance single pass at Hollywood Studios, book Flight of Passage single pass at Animal Kingdom. You could do 5 attractions per day. I mean, you can basically book 5 attractions per day, but the 3 that are multi-pass have to be the same park. And we'll just keep saying it in case, because people miss it. Single pass, again, are a la carte. 1 purchase, 1 ride, multi-pass, 1 purchase for a bunch of rides in the same park. Now, Leslie, one thing we loved about Genie Plus was, unlike Fastpass, you could have overlapping time windows. And what we mean by that is, in the Fastpass system, it was like if you have ride A from 1 to 2 p.m., then your next ride has to be at least 2 to 3 p.m. Like you couldn't have 1 to 2 and 1:30 to 2:30. In this Mutant Baby Hybrid Lightning Lane multi-pass, Leslie, which way is it going? Is it going the Fastpass rules or the Genie Plus rules?
It's going the hybrid rules. So there are limits to how much you can overlap. You can overlap somewhat, but you can't overlap fully these return windows. And I have to flag this because I think this is a bit of a moving target. So far, folks have reported that for pre-booking purposes, you can probably overlap about 20 minutes. So if you have a ride booked from 1 to 2, you should be able to book like a 140 to 240 successfully, but you wouldn't be able to book a 105 to 205 most likely. But these people have reported glitches, and this is not, I'm not entirely positive this is going to set in stone. So if you're listening to this, far in the future, this could be something that changes. But for right now, there are some time overlapping limitations, and there's actually some overlapping limitations for dining reservations as well. And I don't think anybody has fully sussed out what those time limits are yet. So if you book dining, especially like a lunch, you might have an issue then booking a Lightning Lane multi-pass time window because it might overlap too much with meal time. So just be aware of this. I suspect that this may change, especially with dining, because I could see this driving people away from making lunch reservations if they can't get their Lightning Lane return times that they want. So keep an eye on this one for future reference.
Yeah, I think the thing to say is, unlike Fastpass, there isn't a hard restriction on overlaps, which I think matters because just from again, it's only been a month, from the stuff that we've seen come out, it feels like there's almost like a slider that they can move and be like, you can overlap up to 15 minutes, but not 5 or something like that, like it just feels like, that's why it feels like a moving target. It feels like something on the back end, obviously I don't know the code, but you kind of know how things work. It feels like something on the back end is adjustable, like it's a lever that they can move. Whereas with FastPass, it was obviously hard coded. You can't have things overlap. And so, I think we'll see how this evolves, as you said.
Yeah, that's right. So far, all we've really talked about is what happens when you pre-book those first 3 attractions. But you can book more with Lightning Lane Multipass, and that's the really important thing to note. So you're not like maxed out at 3. You should hopefully be able to get a 4th ride or a 5th ride if you are playing your cards right and at least working at it a little bit. So when can you book that 4th ride? And the rule is you can book that 4th ride when you have scanned into the first ride. And what do I mean by that, Joe?
As we said, there's the lightning lane that you can access, but how do you actually get into that lightning lane? Now, the way it'll work is when you have pre-booked your lightning lanes, you have to show Disney that you have pre-booked them. And how do you do that? It's all linked automatically with your My Disney Experience account, which is a reminder that if you don't have a My Disney Experience account yet and you want to go to Walt Disney World, you're probably going to need to get one. And so it's all linked to your My Disney Experience account, and your My Disney Experience account is magically linked to any ticket medium you have. So that could be Magic Mobile, which is basically Apple Pay, but your ticket's on your phone. That could be an RFID card. That could be a Magic Band. Any of those options work. But what happens is if I have Alien Swirling Saucers, my favorite attraction, booked for 2 p.m., at 2 p.m., or it's 2 to 3 o'clock is the window, at 2 o'clock, or 2:05 or 2:10 or whenever. When I go to Alien Swirling Saucers, I go to the lightning lane, I touch my Magic Band, RFID card, or my Magic Mobile to a little Mickey head, basically a reader, and that lights up green, and then they let me in there. So that's how you actually physically get into the lightning lane. And then once you've done that, you can book your next attraction. And the nice thing about Lightning Lane Multipass, which is an improvement on Fastpass and actually an improvement on Genie Plus, in my opinion, is as soon as you've used a Lightning Lane, you can book a new one, and you can always hold 3 at the same time. So you can just keep rolling lightning lanes and getting new lightning lanes. Whereas with Genie Plus, there was all these rules about like 2 hours and this and that, et cetera, et cetera. You can always hold, for me, the easiest way to think about it is I can always hold 3 lightning lanes at the same time. So if I've used one, I can get another one.
That's right. And it's really important that we emphasize that you actually need to do that tap. You need to do that scan in. A lot of folks have wondered, well, what if I cancel a lightning lane, or what if I let a lightning lane expire? Like, am I eligible for the next one right away? No, not really, not necessarily. You want to tap because that also unlocks a lot of the restrictions that are built into that pre-booking system that we've talked about. So remember, I talked about the tiers, right? You can only book one tier 1. Well, once you tap into your first ride for the day, physically, those tier restrictions go away. And then every ride that you book after that could be a tier 1 attraction, assuming you can find it. So those things go away. The time overlap rules go away. So it's really important to physically tap. That's really the key to then making the system fully functional for you for the rest of the day.
Right. And you might be asking, what if I have a park hopper? Like, what happens with that? Same thing. When you tap into that first attraction, that's what unlocks your ability to book Lightning Lane multi-passes at another park. So you want to plan, and just a tiny bit of strategy here, you want at least one Lightning Lane multi-pass to be early, even if it's for something, I don't know, that you probably wouldn't multi-pass regularly, like Disney Junior playing Dance Party or whatever. You want something early so that you can tap into it and unlock all these other features.
So, Joe, I know you have purchased Lightning Lane a couple of times, both for real and for research purposes. How exactly do folks make this purchase?
So one thing I find annoying, I'll say that overall the process is much less painful than you would expect from Disney IT. So damning with faint praise there. One thing that is annoying, you can only do it on your app. I do not love that because I like kind of seeing things on my big screen and figuring that out on multiple screens, but that's how it is. You can only do it on the app right now. Other than that, it's pretty straightforward. You pick the day that you want to buy Lightning Lane multi-pass for, or single pass. And, you just go through the screen and you pick which park you want Lightning Lane multi-pass for. And then you pick your 3 attractions. Disney is going to pre-assign times for those 3 attractions. You also, actually before that, You pick the 3 multi-pass attractions and any single passes you want to add to that. One interesting thing I found was when I did 3 in Hollywood Studios and I did Seven Dwarfs Mine Train as my single pass, the app actually asked me, they're like, do you want to go to Magic Kingdom or Hollywood Studios first? So I thought that was interesting, which is important, right? Because like we said, you got to tap in to unlock everything. So they need to know. It's almost like a de facto park reservation now. But you go through, you select everything. They give you all these times. You can go in right there on that first screen and modify those times and see if you can find a time that you like better. And that I got a little bit of overlapping done then. And then once you are happy with all your times, you go to a purchase screen and they charge you for it. You know, the prices vary anywhere from, it's going to be, we've seen it anywhere from $15 to $39 right now. It's probably going to go up over time, but right now it's still in line with what Genie Plus prices were. And that's it. And then once you're done, they appear in the future plans section of your app. And from the future plan sections of your app, you can modify any of those times to something else. One thing actually very interesting, Leslie, unlike the old system, I could modify my Lightning Lane single pass time. So I think I originally got Seven Dwarfs Mine Train for like 6 o'clock or something like that, just to test it out. Again, I'm going to be in Massachusetts, so I'm not riding this. I tried to switch it and I switched it around a couple times. I think right now I'm scheduled to go at 5:15, but I was just playing around with it. And so you can edit any of those times, and that, you know, gives you some flexibility if you like make a last minute dining reservation, et cetera, et cetera. So all in all, the interface was pretty straightforward. Still got some wonky stuff where like it would say, oh, Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run is ready at 10 a.m. And then I'd be like, change to this time. And then it'd be like, when I got to the next screen, you'll remember this from the early Genie Plus days. It'll be like, your return time has changed. It's got to be 3 o'clock now. And so it wasn't perfect, but not too bad.
So we should also add that as you're doing this, Disney does sort of hold the times that you're selecting, and the cart's good for about 5 minutes. So you have a little bit of time to make sure everything works, but not a lot of time. So select quickly, have a plan, go in. But this is not like Genie Plus used to be fully, where you would think you were booking for 9 a.m. and suddenly you had a return time at 6 p.m. Not like that.
Yeah, it was less stressful. And for better or for worse, Disney giving you times to start with, because you choose your attractions and don't start with times. And then Disney gives you your times. At that point, they've held those times that they've given you. So that point of stress is gone. And then you have the 5 minutes to try to modify to a time you like better. But even after you pay, you can still modify again. So there's a lot more leeway there. And so it's not too bad. Now, Leslie has mentioned this, and it bears repeating. At Magic Kingdom, Epcot, and Hollywood Studios, there are tiered attractions. So you can only get 1 attraction in Tier 1 and 2 attractions in Tier 2. And so really quickly, we want to go over what are the Tier 1 attractions at each of those 3 parks and which should you prioritize. And Animal Kingdom doesn't have enough attractions, so there's no tiers. You can book any 3 you want. So I'll go first with Hollywood Studios. The Tier 1 attractions are Slinky Dog, Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run, Rock and Roller Coaster, Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. Most people are going to be prioritizing Slinky Dog. Honestly, the other 3, they're not going to be as hard to get. You'll probably get like 4, 5, 6 p.m. Lightning Lanes, but they're not as hard to get, you know, on the day of. Whereas Slinky Dog, you might not be able to get it if you don't get it 7 days in advance.
Exactly. And we should just go ahead and flag for folks. I mean, there are still some good attractions in Tier 2. In Hollywood Studios, for example, there's Tower of Terror and Toy Story Mania. Those, to me, are both headliners. So you're not stuck entirely riding duds, at least not in every park, based on the tiering rules.
Yeah, and I will say that even 3 days in advance, you could get any of the Tier 1 attractions you wanted. But I think the main difference, and this is, again, why being an on-site hotel is a big advantage now, is the main difference was everything, what like Slinky Dog was like 7:40 p.m. Toy Story Mania, I could only get 6 p.m. Like basically it was like all afternoon, except for, again, my beloved Alien Swirling Saucers. Like I got that for noon. Everything else was in the afternoon. And this is because, you know, I don't have a hotel stay, so I booked it 3 days in advance. So that's something to know. It'll still work. If you're late risers and only need a few attractions, it might work fine, but I could only get afternoon. So that's Hollywood Studios. Epcot, Tier 1, Remy, Frozen, or Soarin'. I'm guessing the new test track will be there eventually, but it's obviously under a big refurbishment right now. I think you should probably prioritize Remy. Well, Soarin' always later in the night has pretty manageable standby lines, and Frozen has gotten to the point where it's not as popular and it's always pretty easy to rope drop. So I think Remy is your priority in tier 1. All the tier 2s in Epcot, I don't know. What do you think, Leslie? I don't think you really need to prioritize anything. You can kind of, I think you should go on Living with the Land, but I don't think you need to worry about whether you get the lightning lane for that or not.
That's right. That's right. The other ones are just a little bit more filler, but still fantastic rides. Still fantastic rides. All right, let's talk about Animal Kingdom. We already mentioned there are no tiers there, so you can get a pretty good lineup potentially there. You can get, rides like Kilimanjaro, Navi River Journey, Expedition Everest. So there's some solid attractions, but again, you whether you can get the exact time you want for all three is another question. And let's close this out with Magic Kingdom, where there are the most attractions. What are the tier 1 rides, Joe?
Yeah, so right now, the one you should probably prioritize is Tiana's just because it's the newest one. But there's actually quite a few tier 1 attractions at Magic Kingdom. There's Tiana's, Big Thunder Mountain, Jungle Cruise, Peter Pan, Space Mountain. And that actually gives you a decent shot at an early morning tier 1. And I would say at Magic Kingdom, our strategies are still developing. But as of right now, I would say at Magic Kingdom, grab an early tier 1. Well, I guess it works for anything, but grab an early tier 1 so you get at least one of those tier 1s early in the morning. And then after you've tapped into your first attraction, try to get another tier 1 as early as you can. Because with 5 tier 1s at Magic Kingdom, you're going to have a better shot at it. All right, let's take a quick break and then we'll answer a few questions.
All right, well then, why don't we sort of close out this episode? I think folks probably do have a lot of questions about Lightning Lane Multipass. So we've assembled a little bit of an FAQ. So I will ask you the first question, Joe, and you can give folks the short answer because figuring out all these rules, deciphering all these rules is going to take some time. It's taken us some time to get to this point. So what attractions are covered by Lightning Lane Multipass? We've named some of them, but what should folks expect to be covered?
Yeah, so I always think it's easier to think about what's not covered by Multipass. The huge one to think about is character meet and greets are no longer covered by Lightning Lane Multipass. So no character meet and greet has Multipass. It's standby only for everything. So that has a big effect at Magic Kingdom for, just kind of the usefulness. Actually, now that I think about it, if it costs the same, that's definitely a devaluation of the overall product, even though you can book in advance. So no character meet and greets on there. And then at every park, there is an attraction or two that doesn't have Multipass. It's some of our favorite attractions, like People Mover at Magic Kingdom, Grand Fiesta Tour at Epcot. But, in the end, these are attractions that the standby line moves quite quickly, quite well. Living by the Land, honestly, probably does not need to have Multipass, but they got to put something on there. So, just know that not every single attraction is going to have it. Another one that people may want to ride is Astro Orbiter at Magic Kingdom. No Multipass for that either. But the attractions that don't have Multipass are few and far between. And then a lot of them are like shows like Tiki Room, Carousel of Progress, etc.
That's right. So all in, there are about 50 attractions, mostly traditional rides that are included in Lightning Lane Multipass. They're not distributed equally among the parks. There are a lot more at Magic Kingdom than there are at Animal Kingdom. But of course, it's priced accordingly. Like we mentioned, the price range, $15 to $39 right now. Magic Kingdom is always on the upper end of that spectrum. Animal Kingdom is always on the lower end of that spectrum. And you buy the price for the park that you're starting in. So even if you start in Animal Kingdom and pay that cheap price, and you have a park hopper, you don't pay any more when you start to use Lightning Lane Multipass in other parks that same day. So that's something we ought to flag.
Yes, actually, that's one of our FAQs, which is how does the price of Multipass work with park hopping? And you just answered it, Leslie. You always pay the price of your first park. If you have a park hopper, you can use the Multipass at the next parks after you are at least tapped into the first attraction at the first park. And we should say that, like old school park reservations, they are very serious about you got to tap in to at least one attraction in the park you started with first. Otherwise, you got to talk to like a Blue Umbrella or something and then pay the price of the park that you're trying to hop to. So there's no hacks there that we know of, at least, where you can pay the Animal Kingdom price and not go to Animal Kingdom at all. So we should say that. All right, next question. Important question, Leslie. Multipass gives you these 1 hour windows, like from 2 to 3 o'clock or from 4:30 to 5:30 when you're supposed to go to the attraction. Is there wiggle room? Is there a grace period for the times that you can actually get into the attraction?
Yes, there is. At Walt Disney World, you can enter a lightning lane up to 5 minutes early. The scanners will automatically recognize that lightning lane, and you shouldn't encounter any sort of friction from cast members and just go straight on. And then currently, up to 119 minutes, 2 hours essentially, you have to scan in late, and the scanners should turn green. This can change. We should mention that Disneyland only has a 15-minute grace period, so 119 minutes at Walt Disney World is pretty generous. And there is, again, human intervention that can help. If you miss a lightning lane because you have a kid who has a diaper explosion and you have to go back to your hotel room, talk to a cast member at a blue umbrella. They usually can work something out, or the cast member even at the attraction may just wave you right in. So there are grace periods, but don't abuse this. I mean, that's the bottom line. They recognize at Disney that things happen, especially when you're traveling with small kids.
For sure. And they're not going to say the 119 minutes out loud. We just know that from experience. I think if you were to press them for how long you have, they might say there's a 15-minute grace period. And this was true in the Genie Plus days. We never talked about the 119 minutes in the Genie Plus days, but at this point, there's been so much evidence that it'll start when Leslie says, just in case you're not a Disney regular, when Leslie says it turns green, when you actually tap your ticket media to the Mickey head, when it turns green, that just means go. And then the cast member just lets you through without looking at anything. If it turns blue, then the cast member has to have an interaction with you. And it never turns red because Disney's never that negative. But, that's kind of how it works. So if you get there within 119 minutes, it's going to turn green. You're going to go right through, no friction at all. Okay, next question. Really quickly, can you modify lightning lanes? Yes, we discussed that already, and we think you should. I have been messing with my lightning lanes. Still can't get a morning lightning lane on this fake day that I'm going to, but I hope springs eternal. I'm going to try to get a morning lightning lane before this episode comes out. Of course, you'll never know, but you should keep trying to modify. And even if you can't modify to the morning, at least you can modify to times that are better for you. Okay. How many people can you book for a party, Leslie?
You can book up to a max of 12 people at one time. So you can have a pretty big group, but not a massive family reunion, I guess. All right, that was an easy one. Next question's for you, Joe. Can you have 2 lightning lanes booked for the same time? We started to touch on this, but give the definitive answer.
You can definitely have overlap. You probably can't have, or we haven't seen evidence that you can have 2 attractions for the same time, 2 to 3 p.m., but you can have a bit of an overlap so that you're not waiting an hour until your next attraction. So you can kind of pseudo stack. Stacking is a term that came up in the Genie Plus days. I can't book them all for the same exact 1 hour window, but I can stagger them 20 minutes, 30 minutes apart. So I can move pretty quickly there.
And I should asterisk this as well, Joe, because this is true for pre-booking. You can only have some overlap. For real-time, 4th and 5th bookings, it does seem to be that you can have much more overlap. So this is really more something to keep in mind for that 7 days in advance, 3 days in advance. Once you're in the park, it's a bit more of a free-for-all in terms of what you can overlap.
Once again, tap into that first attraction, unlock these extra features, or just, they just cancel most of the rules when you do that. Next question is, do you have to buy Lightning Lane Multipass or Lightning Lane Single Pass? No, you do not. It's important to know that A, you don't need to buy either. B, you don't need to buy one to get the other. You can either get Multipass or Single Pass. And then C, at Disney World, if you have 5 days of tickets, you can buy Multipass on 3 days, and you don't have to do the same thing for every single day. And so it's just day by day, you make the decision. Every day in your trip, you decide, do I want multipass? Yes or no? Do I want any single passes? Yes or no?
Yeah, exactly. It really is quite flexible in terms it really is quite flexible in terms of how you customize each day of your vacation. All right, Joe, what happens if a ride that you have pre-booked with Lightning Lane Multipass breaks? What happens if it's down for whatever reason, it's raining or it's not working at the moment?
Yeah, so what's going to happen is you're going to get what's called a multi-experience pass, and that's going to be loaded into your My Disney experience. Again, everything's automatically connected to your tickets, and that is going to give you the chance to use at multiple attractions at any time during the day. And that's the best part of the multi-experience pass. You don't have to worry about times, grace periods, any of that nonsense. You can do it at any time. Depending on which ride broke down, that's going to determine which attractions you can use it for. So rule of thumb, not exactly 100%, but decent rule of thumb, if a tier 1 multi-pass goes down, you're going to get a multiple experience pass that pretty much covers everything in the park that you are in. If there's a tier 2, then it's probably going to be mostly tier 2s. Sometimes there are some like sub tiers within there. It's not worth it in this episode to go through every single nuance. Not that we even know every single nuance, but rule of thumb, tier 1 attraction, you get a multi-experience for that. You can use that for anything. Tier 2 attraction, you're not going to be able to get. Let me put it this way. If Disney Junior Play breaks down, you're not going to be able to use that on Slinky Dog Dash, quite obviously. The other thing to mention is if you do have a park hopper and let's say a tier 1 attraction breaks down on you and you are planning to park hop, you can talk to a Blue Umbrella and see if they can give you a multi-experience pass for something in the park that you're hopping to. So ask, see what they can do for you. And, the worst they can say is no.
Exactly. So another question we've started to touch on, but haven't fully answered for folks. If an attraction that you want to book with Lightning Lane Multipass is sold out, not available left for the day, are you out of luck? Are you not going to get to ride that ride at Walt Disney World on that day?
Well, for starters, unless it's a virtual queue attraction, you can always stand by, which, so there's always that option. I know it's tough to imagine in this day and age, Leslie, for you and me to wait and stand by for something. But yes, you can always wait and stand by for it. But I think what we've seen with MultiPass, Disney has always kind of released availability during the day, on the day of, for Fastpass, for Genie Plus, for all these things. What we've seen for MultiPass is it does seem like they're actually holding more inventory back and dropping like a little bit more on the day of. And so what it comes down to and what it boils down to is keep checking your app. You never know what attraction can show up, what can be there. Actually, a few days ago, I got an email from Standby Skipper that says they're up and running. Still can't believe that Disney hasn't shut that down. Haven't gotten to test that again yet, but I bet you Standby Skipper, if you have it running a search for you in the background, they would be able to pick up, the kind of term people use is drops. But the concept is Disney, over the course of a day, will release inventory for lightning lanes for a certain attraction. Keep checking your app and you should be able to pick it up, and maybe even Standby Skipper is back. And if you want to hear our Standby Skipper episode, I'm guessing it's going to work pretty similarly to how it worked with Genie Plus. You can check out episode 309. We talked about my experience with Standby Skipper then. Anything else to add about missing availability beforehand and trying to get it the day off?
Well, I think we'll have to save it for our 201 episode, because this is definitely part of the strategy to maximizing Lightning Lane Multipass is doing this refreshing, doing this work, trying to find new inventory, figuring out how it fits into your day. And this will change and develop. Like you say, right now in these early days of Lightning Lane Multipass, we suspect that Disney is holding back quite a bit of inventory, and that may change as seasons change, as we get into a busier time of year around the holidays, and as people get better at using these systems. And Disney, of course, uncovers whatever bugs they need to fix. So stay tuned. And when you and I use this for 201, we will be talking about this much more.
All right. Well, we know that's a lot. Just in case, like, you've listened to this episode and you're still like, oh, I'm so overwhelmed and it's just too much. I will be honest. It's not great for people like Leslie and me, who you might call power users. For power users, Lightning Lane Multipass, it's gonna probably result in us getting to use less lightning lanes than we are used to. But the reality is, and this is for the better of Disney visitors in general, if you are a normal Disney visitor visiting for, your one time, or you only visit once every couple of years, Lightning Lane Multipass is a lot more user-friendly. I think it's overall going to just make the vacation feel a little bit less stressful than it has. And so even if you're really confused by all these rules, I would just say, just book your multi-passes in advance, and the interface is pretty easy. Use it on the day of, learn as you go along. It's not as stressful as Genie Plus was, or even Fastpass in some respects. So don't worry about it. And if you decide to purchase it, go ahead, use it, and don't stress about it. You'll be okay.
Agree. I do think for just the pre-booking the 3 rides in advance, it's much more user-friendly. The test for me is, if I sit down with my mom and dad and showed this to them, could I teach it to them? And yes, I could teach the pre-booking part in the My Disney Experience app to my parents. I don't think I could teach what we're going to talk about in the 201, perhaps.
Indeed. All right, Leslie, do you have a Lightning Lane multi-pass Disney do or don't for us to end the episode with?
Yes, I would add, don't buy Lightning Lane multi-pass when you don't need it. And this is trickier because now you're having to purchase potentially up to 7+ days in advance, and you don't necessarily know what the crowd levels are going to look like fully, or know exactly how your vacation is going to take shape. I mean, it was in some ways easier when you booked the morning of, and maybe you decided that day you weren't going to the parks and you were going to, or you were going to sleep in. So now you have to do a little bit more pre-planning. So do the research, figure out when you need it, when you don't need it, look at crowd levels, and then make different decisions for different parks. Like, I think maybe a lot of people don't need it for Animal Kingdom. Maybe a lot of people don't need it at Epcot. You could rope drop a headliner attraction. You could, if you have early entry, you can use that to ride rides with shorter lines. But personally, I would always be purchasing it for Hollywood Studios and Magic Kingdom, because I think you need it more there to get on more rides. But do the work. I mean, if you're going at Christmas time, you might want to purchase it for everything.
Yeah, it'll probably be more than $39 by this Christmas. Let's say that. Yeah, you're totally right, Leslie. It's funny you bring up Animal Kingdom. I've had 2 planning calls with clients this week discussing multipass. And for both of them, I was like, you know what? You have young kids. You're probably going to get to Animal Kingdom at 7:30 a.m. Forget multipass. Because if you get to Animal Kingdom at 7:30 a.m., I'll just say it really quickly. This is what I would do. This is what I told all my clients. Give you all this for free. Not that working with me costs money, but 7:30 a.m., go to Navi River Journey. By 8 o'clock, go to Kali River Rapids. My gosh, do not go there. 8 o'clock, go to Kilimanjaro Safaris. And then after that, you can head to Everest if you want. But really, those are the main 2 that you're going to have huge standby lines on. And then just, if you really want to go on Flight of Passage, purchase that Flight of Passage Lightning Lane single pass. But you could probably, even waiting in lines, you could be done by 9:30. Navi, Flight of Passage, Kilimanjaro Safaris, and Expedition Everest. You could be done with all 4 of those by 9:30 or 10, as long as you get to Animal Kingdom at 7:30. Only the true sickos get to Animal Kingdom to rope drop at 7:30, so you're going to be ahead of quite a few people. So you don't need Lightning Lane multipass if you're an early riser for Animal Kingdom. All right. Well, that does it for our Lightning Lane Multipass 101 episode. We're excited to do a 201 episode in the future, because that's when we get to have a lot of fun trying to figure out how badly we can break the system. So look forward to that in the future. If you have any experiences with Lightning Lane Multipass, we'd love to hear them. Let us know. DisneyDeciphered@gmail.com, at WWDeciphered on Twitter, or on Instagram, Disney Deciphered. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to listen to this. And other than that, Leslie, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. And I will see you gearing up to be the first person to try one of these things on this podcast, because it's usually me who gets to go first.
Thanks, Joe.